We are so excited that you're here, and I'm excited to officially welcome you into the space. Welcome to our webinar. I'm very excited to be participating alongside some of my fellow OneGoal staff members and some incredible OneGoal alumni guests, which I will get to in just a second. The first thing that I'm going to do is invite you to answer a quick poll. I'd love to know more about, again, who's in the building with us. So we'd love for you to answer how best do you identify in your connection to OneGoal today? Feel free to answer the poll as you see it. I can start to see some answers coming in on my end. Let's see, we've got some current OneGoal secondary partners here. How exciting, and post-secondary partners come through. Welcome, friends. We love to see it. We love to see you. We love partnering with you, and we're so glad you're with us today. We've also got a couple of prospective OneGoal partners. Listen, join OneGoal, okay? Join us. So glad that you're here to learn more about the partnership that you will be signing up for. I'm going to go ahead and speak that into existence because we love our partners. We've also have some foundation representatives and grantors. Okay, funders, come through. Thank you so much for joining us. And I love to see some of the community members that are here with us as well. That's beautiful, beautiful. And then there's some others. I love that other category because I don't know what it means. It could mean a ghost. It could mean so many things. So welcome to all of you who maybe are not a partner but want to learn more about OneGoal. We love that you're here with us today. Okay, I got 100% answered. Boom. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. We're excited to have all of you here, and especially a lovely shout out to our partners again. And I am ready to get started with you. So first, just a couple of housekeeping notes. The webinar today is being recorded. We ask that you please feel free at any point that you have questions to utilize that Q&A section at the bottom of your webinar screen. We would love for you to drop in any questions that come up for you throughout our time together today, as we will have a quick Q&A session towards the end where you'll hear from our OneGoal CEO and some of our alumni and my dear colleague who has been putting in so much work on the research here, Daranee. So feel free at any point if you have questions throughout our time today. Use that Q&A section to drop your questions in, and we will do our best to get those answered. Additionally, just so that you know and you're aware, if there's anything that you hear that you were like, man, I missed that, or I really want to emphasize that, don't you worry, we got your back. This session, again, is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out along with a couple of other things, such as the research brief of some of the data you'll be hearing today, and also a PDF of all of the slides that you'll see today. So that'll be coming out in the coming weeks. Next up, our agenda, okay? You're in the welcome and opening now. Hi, welcome. So glad you're here. You're going to hear a little bit of research again from my colleague Daranee, which I'm very excited about. You'll hear from our CEO, Melissa. I'm also very excited about that. You'll hear some implications and recommendations based on the research that is presented today. And then, as I mentioned, that Q&A section that'll happen towards the end of our time together. And yay, now I get to introduce my friends. Very excited. So I'm going to start by introducing the OneGoal staff folks who you'll be hearing from today, starting with my friend, my girl, my sis, Melissa Connolly, whom I affectionately call MC at all times. Melissa is our CEO here at OneGoal, and will be sharing some vision and just her joy and excitement around the work that we do here at OneGoal. And I'm very honored that you all get to hear from her today. We also have my incredible colleague, Daranee. Daranee Teng is going to be presenting. She is our Director of Program Learning. She has spent the last year and a half putting together the research that you're going to be hearing about today, and I'm very excited that we get to learn from her expertise together. And myself, hi, Pam Johnson Davis, Director of Fellow Support on the Chicago team here at OneGoal. Very excited to be here as your facilitator and host. And lastly, our two panelists, additional panelists, are OneGoal alumni. Literally, the reason that we exist as an org is to serve students, to serve students all over the country. And I'm very excited that we have two alumni here with us today. First, we have Elijah Wright Jefferson, who is a senior at Illinois State studying graphic design and video. He is a part of the 2016 graduating class from the OneGoal program. And he also recently worked with the OneGoal Chicago team on the innovation team, specifically on the Summer Hub, which I'm sure some of you heard about over the summer, which is very exciting. Elijah, we're so glad that you're here. And last but not least, Sarah Daniels. Sarah is a OneGoal class of 2011 alumni, and she is a graduate of Millikan University with a degree in communications and PR, okay? And she also has an MPA from the University of Illinois Springfield. And excitingly, she's also currently working as an assistant executive director at the Illinois Collaboration on Youth. So those are our lovely panelists. You all are really in for a treat. I'm so excited for you to hear from our alumni and our staff members. And speaking of that, now I get to pass the virtual mic to our lovely CEO, Melissa Connolly, who will tell you a bit more about who we are and what we do.
Thanks so much, Pam. And first, just want to extend some gratitude to everyone who was able to make time early in December to join this webinar and learn more about our work and the voices of our students. And I know this is an incredibly busy time of year, so I do not take it for granted. Truly, thank you for your presence and engagement throughout today. Again, as Pam mentioned, my name is Melissa Connolly. I am the CEO and have been in seat in this position for about 2.5 years, but actually have been with the organization for the last 8, first as a Chicago program team member and then leading national program. So many of you know OneGoal is a national post-secondary access and success organization whose mission is to close the degree divide in America in our lifetime. We are working diligently to ensure that we are creating a more equitable future for all students across the country. We've worked for the last 14 years in partnership with high schools and districts across the country who work with a cohort of students throughout junior year and senior year of high school to ensure that they have the time, the resources, the encouragement, the affirmation that they need to pursue their post-secondary aspirations. And then what is unique about our program is we don't just stop there. We ensure that they are successful throughout their first year of their post-secondary pathway because we understand how important it is to get momentum during that first year to ensure that you actually are on a path to completion. We are incredibly proud and humbled by the work that we've been able to do across 6 different regional sites, 14,000 students a year for the last 14 years, and have seen some remarkable results. 84% of OneGoal high school graduates enroll in a post-secondary institution. 75% of those who enroll persist 1 year after high school. We are now on a mission to ensure that all OneGoal students are completing at a rate that is 2 times that of their peers. We believe it is unjust that many students are entering a post-secondary pathway, and all stats show that they have less than a 50-50 shot of completing their goals. And we think that actually it's possible in the next 4 years to change that reality. One thing I think it's really important to just ground in as we engage in the research for today is that it is truly a manifestation of our values. 3 years ago, we stepped back and we reimagined who we wanted to be in this world as an organization. We reimagined our values through the lessons that we had learned for more than a decade. One of those values, which I hope you hear come through very clearly today in our research, is innovation. And our innovation core value states that we believe that achieving our mission requires a commitment of learning and ongoing transformation. We reflect and conduct analysis to iterate on what's working at all times, and we encourage smart risks that will move us boldly towards our vision. We confront our biases, challenge assumptions, and provide space to dream big, face our fears, and harness the power of value. In many ways, that's what we want to be true for the experiences our students have in classroom. So there's the same things we want to be true for the experiences we have as a staff. To me, there's no greater or more powerful commitment to learning than the commitment to listen to the students we are serving. We have to understand their experiences and then use those lessons to fuel innovation. We intentionally did this research study at the end of our last strategic plan because we knew it was going to be critical to pull the lessons from our students to chart our path forward. So while we will certainly spend the majority of the time with that research, with those lessons learned, I'm hopeful that we can have enough time at the end to really share how it's informing our path forward. So with that, I will pass it back to Pam so you can hear from the real stars of the show.
MC, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing all about who we are and why we did this research. Always grateful for you. All right, and now I get to pass it to Daranee, who has spent the last year and a half digging deep into this research. She's going to share about the methodology, some of the findings, and so much more. I'm excited for you all to learn from her. Just a quick reminder as she's going through the presentation and throughout our entire time together, if at any time questions arise for you, we love questions, okay? We love them. Please, please, please feel free to use the Q&A function here at the bottom of the webinar screen. And with that, I will pass it over to Daranee.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm excited to dive in. So my role at OneGoal is focused primarily on qualitative research, and my favorite part of my job is being able to listen to the stories and perspectives and experiences of our fellows across the country. So we know that students from low-income communities are 3 times less likely to earn a post-secondary degree than their counterparts in their peers in high-income communities. So this national study that we worked on takes a closer look at the underlying causes to help us understand the why, behind this gap, the why behind why students aren't able to complete their degrees. So we focused on 2 research questions. What's the root cause of student stopout? We know a lot of the symptoms. We know there's a lot of different challenges that students face, but really wanted to dig into like the nuances and complexities behind some of these reasons. And then also wanted to understand, so why students who stop out, why do they end up returning to complete their degrees or potentials? Like what conditions are in place, or what, what's happening in their lives that support them being able to return to school? And various schools and organizations define stop out in different ways. For the purposes of this study, we define stopping out as withdrawing from all classes for 1 or more semesters. So these are some of the inputs that went into this study. We started with an alumni survey, which was an electronic form that was pushed out to all of the students who had at one time, completed the OneGoal 3-year program. Also conducted a literature review, which consisted of reviewing internal artifacts, studies that had already been done within OneGoal, reviewing both regional and national level data, just to understand the completion challenges that our students had been facing. And then also did an external literature review to look at scholarly research, what's out there from peer organizations, what's out there that's, in terms of academic articles, to understand more about completion challenges and stopping out. And then finally, also conducted interviews with students from across the country to just really understand like what the different circumstances were, so that we could begin to draw themes from what our students were telling us. So this provides an overview of our research sample. So, who we spoke to for the study. As I mentioned, students from across the country. Chicago is our founding region and our largest region. So you'll see that most of the students I spoke with were from the Chicago region, but also have representation from the other 4 other regions. We operate in the Bay Area as well, but at the time the study was conducted, we did not have alumni in the Bay Area because it's our newest region. But this also shows you just the breakdown of who we spoke with. Spoke with students from high school graduating classes between 2011 and 2019 for this study as well. All right, so now I'd like to invite you all to answer a poll. I'm going to share a quote with you. So this is one of the students that I interviewed in this study. So invite you all to read this quote here in the box on the left-hand side, and then we'll be launching a poll. We'll just love your input. After you read this quote, we'd love to hear from you. Like what do you think is the primary reason the student left school? And then what supports do you think would have had the most impact on the students to be able to persist semester after semester to ultimately complete their degree? So we'll give you all a little bit of time to read the quote and then to begin to answer the poll. Great. So I'm seeing some responses starting to come in. We have social emotional challenges is in the lead. so far. Coming in at second place are financial challenges. Some of our audience members are saying academic challenges. Great. Yeah, so right now we're at about 69% of you all in the audience said social emotional challenges. And so this is, but we also have people who are saying financial challenges and academic challenges. And so this just is an example of how interconnected a lot of these challenges are. While there may be one root cause for why students are stopping out, what we've really learned is that there are multiple things going on, multiple challenges going on that really just compound whatever issues the students are that we're facing. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into all of this. So I'd like to begin to dive into some of our research findings here. So these categories may not be any surprises to us. There's 4 categories: financial, social emotional, academic, and aspirational. These are all challenges. These were the strongest challenges that emerged from the study in terms that contribute to students not being able to complete their degree. So while these categories may not be any surprise to us, what the study does is we dig into more of the nuances behind these general reasons that led to students stopping out. I also wanted to put out a disclaimer. As Pam mentioned earlier, we'll be sharing the slides along with a recording of the session afterwards. This was a pretty extensive study, so we'll have a lot of slides. You'll probably notice that I won't have covered all of the slides that you'll end up receiving later. And I may have skipped some of the slides during this presentation today, but the slides that you'll receive are meant to be a reference for you. So really encourage you all to come back later, engage with the slides. There's a lot of rich quotes from fellows that I interviewed and alumni that I interviewed for this study. So really encourage you to dive deeper into that once you do receive copies of the slides. So 75 students were surveyed, and I interviewed 40 of them, followed up to dig deeper into some of their survey responses. But 75 students named challenges that led them to stopping out. Several named multiple causes, which underscores the compounding nature of these obstacles. So, a student who may have been facing financial challenges, those financial challenges may have been triggered by being put on academic probation, and trying to dig into understand why was the student put on academic probation. It's because their parent passed away, and they were dealing with a lot of social emotional issues. And so it really just shows you how interconnected a lot of these challenges are for our students. So we'll dive into the first category, which is financial reasons. Financial reasons were the strongest factor contributing to stop-outs for students interviewed in this study. And so, as I mentioned before, it's no big surprise. We know that it's expensive to go to school in the US. College is expensive, and even other training programs and certificate programs, it all costs money here. And so that's no surprise to us, but we'd like to dig into a little bit more of, what does it mean to have financial challenges, and what were some of the specific challenges that came out as a strong theme from the students interviewed across the US. So while some students name post-secondary specific financial challenges, such as challenges related specifically to FAFSA, or challenges related to understanding different elements that impacted their financial aid status, there were also a lot of challenges that were just general financial challenges, like being able to pay their bills or being able to afford transportation. Or so we saw these challenges fall into 2 general categories: things that are very specific to post-secondary spaces, as well as financial challenges that were just more about life and being able to make ends meet. So we'll go ahead and dig into some of these financial challenges. So one of the first pieces relates to just college knowledge. We had, students that reported not fully understanding institutional policies like add and drop dates, not knowing, understanding fully what a degree plan was, and needing to follow a specific degree plan and not just take classes that sounded fun or interesting, and not knowing how many classes they needed to be taking each semester. And so this lack of college knowledge negatively impacted their financial aid status, and ultimately led them to stopping out as a result of having taken the wrong classes, or dropped classes after the institutional deadlines, or not registering for the appropriate number of credit hours in order to maintain their financial aid status. Another issue that came up quite a bit was just an inability to pay off their account balance. So a lot of high schools and post-secondary access programs do a great job of helping students make sure their first year of school is covered. So we're really good at the access part. But because there's a lot of scholarships and financial aid opportunities coming in for freshmen, college, like traditional college freshmen, that is an area that I think high schools and post-secondary access programs are really good at covering. However, a lot of students named that they struggled to cover the cost of school beyond their first year because there were forms of scholarships and grants that were non-renewable. And they didn't feel equipped to be able to seek out or just didn't know where to look in terms of finding additional financial aid and scholarships. So this is an example of just general financial aid challenges. So not even related specifically to, post-secondary specific challenges. So this is a pretty powerful quote around just having to balance, competing demands. It's like, I really want to go to school, but this quote here where it talks about, unfortunately, school feeds the brain, but not the stomach. So a lot of our students reported, just having to work to make ends meet, to bring in income. And so there are a lot of challenges related to just being able to cover the bills or feeling obligated to support their families financially. So now this brings us to students who overcame financial barriers. So students who were, enrolled and then they had to stop out at some point and then were eventually able to re-enroll to continue pursuing their degree. And so these are characteristics or students who re-enrolled. The common themes that we saw in this study where they accessed resources or programs they either didn't know about before or didn't have access to before when they were previously enrolled. So examples include, online, low-cost online programs. At OneGoal, we have a national partnership with Southern New Hampshire University, and it's an online program that's very affordable. And several of the students I spoke with, they had re-enrolled in this program because it worked with their schedules, and it was also something that they could afford to pay for. Other opportunities are, work study or scholarships or things that, students didn't know about before, but, learned about once they were able to re-enroll. So as I mentioned before, I won't be covering all of the slides in this presentation. So if you're not able to read all of the quotes before we switch slides, don't worry, we will send these slides to you afterwards. So the next major category of challenges that students faced were social emotional reasons. So when combined with like other issues happening, social emotional challenges just create this compounding feedback loop. So financial struggles create social emotional challenges, which then negatively impact academic performance. And then alumni encountering financial challenges, which we spoke about before, they reported like significant difficulties in managing the psychological burden of their financial struggles. So the strain and the emotional strain and the stress that puts on students was a major theme that came out of the interviews in speaking with our OneGoal alumni. And then for a lot of the students I spoke with, major personal and or family events or crises also created social emotional strain that leads to academic underperformance, which then negatively impacts a student's financial aid status, eventually leading to stop out. So these are all examples of how interconnected a lot of these challenges are. So mental health challenges, this was the most common social emotional struggle. And for various reasons, students talked about feeling homesick, or they talked about, just anxiety or, things going on at home that they felt, was really overwhelming. So whether it was like, my grandma got sick and I felt, and I felt like I was helpless and I couldn't do anything about it. So mental health challenges came up quite a bit. Another one named was unhealthy dating relationships while they were away from home as well. So multiple mental health challenges emerged in this category. Another piece was lack of social belonging. So alumni who felt a strong sense of social belonging reported having a positive experience at their post-secondary institution, and they were more inclined to seek out academic and or social emotional support. And so it really teaches us that feeling a sense of social belonging is a significant factor in whether our students feel like their chosen institution was a good fit. And then on the flip side, a lot of students who They said they were aware of available resources on campus, but they were reserved about asking for help or didn't utilize academic or social emotional support services on campus. And they said they were less likely to reach out if they didn't feel that sense of belonging on campus. And another piece that plays into this is several alumni, they spoke about having negative experiences with professors, and all it took was one professor that they really had a difficult relationship with, and that played a strong contributing factor leading to their eventual stop out. And so this quote here really speaks to that around and this also will speak to another theme that comes up later around students just dealing with systemic racism, where they feel like in predominantly white institutions, especially, that not feeling a strong connection to the institution where they're at. So the theme of social belonging plays in, really plays into students' success on their post-secondary journey. And then another piece is just this lack of parent college knowledge. So for first generation students specifically, it's really, parents not feeling like in the loop or understanding the process or knowing how they can be supporting their students. And so we learned from this that we need to do more in order to make information more accessible to parents and family members. And you'll see this show up in one of our recommendations later in today's session. So students who had stopped out but eventually re-enrolled, who had stopped out because of social emotional challenges and then eventually re-enrolled, these were some of the things that they named. They named that becoming involved in an on-campus student organization really helped with social belonging. So examples were named like Black Student Association or Latina sororities. Affinity groups came up quite a bit, where they found, they found like a sense of belonging on campus. Another piece was, students just felt like they were motivated by people around them, whether it was people they respected, whether it was friends or family members or other adults in their lives who had gone on to receive their degree. Other students said, most of my high school friend group, I saw them all finishing their degrees, and that made me want to go back to school as well. And then another piece was just needing time to shift their mindset before re-enrolling, and this will play into one of our other findings that came out around professional aspirations. So really needing time to shift their mindset and figure it out, what is it that I want to do? So then this brings us to our professional aspiration related reasons that students ended up stopping out. So a lot of the students that I interviewed for this study, they attributed stopping out to lacking a clear purpose for pursuing their post-secondary pathway beyond a sense of obligation from external social pressures, whether that was from teachers or family members or community members, or just messaging that's out there around this is the next logical step after high school that you need to be pursuing. So a lot of times this led to students attending a 4-year degree program or a 2-year program that was not aligned to their actual individual aspirations. So an example of this is I spoke with a student who wanted to open his own boxing gym and become a personal trainer, but he was steered toward a 4-year college to study business instead, because his teacher was like, oh, if you want to own your own boxing gym, you need to understand how to run a business. And he ended up going to a 4-year college to study business, and that was not what he was passionate about or not what he was interested in. And he ended up stopping out and having debt, but no degree. So this quote here from one of our OneGoal alums is an example of the ways that student voice has informed some of our recommendations for improvement to our curriculum and our one-on-one advising approach, which we'll see later in today's presentation. But this also speaks to that messaging, that really strong messaging that students internalize around, this is your option, this is what you need to do, and it is confusing when they're not sure yet what their actual aspiration is, or they have an idea of their aspiration, but are pushed towards a pathway that doesn't align with their aspiration. Another theme that came out was that just lack of information about the different pathways and the different options that are out there. So we had students who were interested in non-degree pathways, that didn't require attending a 2 or 4-year college or university. And they, as I mentioned before, they were just really internalizing this messaging, from various places, around 4-year college is best. And so a lot of students who stopped out, they talked about having that lack of clarity regarding their purpose for being in school and needing to find themselves. And then several students I spoke with also stated a lack of alignment between the post-secondary institution they attended and their professional aspiration, as you saw in the previous example that I gave. And then motivation for a degree. So this relates to what we just discussed about students pursuing pathways that don't necessarily align to their own aspirations. And it also speaks to the external pressures that a lot of first-generation students face. And when they don't succeed, they spoke about experiencing just a great sense of failure and shame because they wanted to really like make their family members proud. And so while students talked about a lot of their motivation for pursuing a degree was to make their family proud, this was still like an external pressure that they felt. And when they felt like they didn't succeed, it created a lot of shame. So these are two powerful quotes from students interviewed for this study who had both been initially enrolled in a post-secondary institution, but then encountered circumstances that required them to leave school. Both of these students talked about wanting to go back to school to make their families and communities proud. But you'll notice both of these quotes are from two different students from two different parts of the country. And they talked about how they had this like love and support from their families, and they wanted to make their families proud and to be the first in their families, to pursue higher education, and also wanted to, like acknowledge their family members for sacrifices that they had made. And so in terms of overcoming some of these barriers related to professional aspirations, students who had stopped out because they either lacked that clarity around, what's my purpose for being in school, or I lacked the alignment between what maybe they knew their purpose, but then they were at an institution that didn't align with what they believed their purpose was in terms of professional aspiration. So for the ones that were able to re-enroll, they said it was because they had close relationships with adults in their lives who supported their professional aspirations. And you'll see this quote on the right. And I think it's very powerful where this alum like reflects on his experience where he was like, my teacher, my program director supported me and didn't make me feel less than, because what I wanted to do wasn't becoming, becoming a doctor or a lawyer or some of these four-year pathways. He was very passionate about the arts and pursuing theater. And he ended up going to a four-year university to study theater, ended up not completing at that four-year university, but found an alternative pathway, and now lives in Los Angeles and is doing pretty well for himself without a degree, and was able to pursue his passion there. And he attributes that to the adults in his life who really supported him and allow him to define success for himself. And so our final category is academic reasons for stopping out. So one of the interesting things about this study is while a lot of students felt academically underprepared, they struggled to adjust to the rigor of college when they got there. But academic reasons were not the main obstacle for any of the students who participated in this study. We heard from a lot that said, yeah, the academics were tough, but I think if I didn't have all of this other stuff going on in my life, like referring to financial or social emotional issues, then I could have handled the academics or could have found the resources to get through the academics. So in each of the circumstances of the students I spoke with, the root cause of their stop out was tied to financial, social, emotional, or that aspiration related challenge. And while academic reasons were present, or challenges were present, it wasn't the primary reason that they stopped out. However, we still want to name two important academic related trends that we heard, which were under-resourced high schools and a systemic racism. So in regard to under-resourced high schools, I spoke with a lot of students attending predominantly white institutions where they were very aware of disparities in academic performance between students who came from well-resourced K-12 schools compared to those who didn't. And so students were very aware, I'm coming in and I'm noticing the people around me and just being like, is this something I should have learned when I was in high school? And really just being aware of that, and also just getting to the point where they're like, what's the point of me being here if I'm so far behind? So it really just manifested in a lot of low self-confidence, during their post-secondary experience. And then in terms of systemic racism, once again, students, they have a very acute awareness of dynamics happening around them. And many of them name specific examples of either overt or covert experiences with racism during their post-secondary journeys. And this relates to what I had shared earlier about students having negative experiences with professors. Spoke to one student who was accused of plagiarism because she didn't learn how to cite something properly in one of her English classes. And she's like, I never learned this in high school. I was accused of plagiarism and then ended up having to have a disciplinary hearing, and the whole process was humiliating. And so in sharing some of these stories, like we're really learning, this is helping inform like, how do we better support students to navigate some of these challenges that they might experience? So I'm going to go ahead and pause there and pass it back to Pam, and we will have time a little bit later in the session for questions related to some of the findings. But before we dive into implications and recommendations, I'd like to pass it back over to Pam.
Thank you so much, Daranee. This has been incredible so far, and I appreciate all the work that you've done. Reminder, everyone, please feel free to use the Q&A. I saw a couple of questions come through. Continue to do that. If you have any thoughts or questions that are coming up as you learn today, please do use that Q&A function. And now I get the opportunity to have two of our OneGoal alumni, Elijah and Sarah, talk a little bit more about themselves. So Elijah, Sarah, I'm gonna give you each like a minute, but I'm not timing you, but time yourself. To share first a little bit about your OneGoal journey, and then also you both took a pause or stopped out at some point in your post-secondary path, and we'd love to know a little bit about that. So a little about your OneGoal journey and a little bit about why you stopped out. And I guess we'll start with Sarah.
Great. So I'll try to keep it short, but so my OneGoal journey started, I want to say, I know you all said junior year, but I remember my sophomore year. My sophomore year honors literature teacher presented when it was still, the former name, I won't say it, but, and it was a really great experience because I had already loved her as a teacher. So to know that she would also be my program director and helping me with my FAFSA and things that I knew that my very family couldn't do as, outside of traditional school hours and things, we would have like workshops in the evenings and things like that. So she also was one of the ones that took me on one of my first college tours. So my journey with OneGoal was like amazing. Unfortunately, she couldn't hold my hand my entire first year. So that kind of, led to a lot of, I didn't choose to go to the schools that my peers went to. I went with one of my other fellow friend. Well, she was my close friend, roommate, and she was also a OneGoal fellow as well. But my experience, I had a lot of what Daranee just spoke to with financial issues. I had a lot of, homesickness. I come from a huge family of 11. So being away from my family, and I know that something that I also noticed too, when I went home every weekend for every holiday, that also led to me wanting to just go back home. So I did stop out for about 3 semesters, and I did attempt to go to a community college. Unfortunately, that was backwards, going from a university to a community college. And I just felt kind of, jumping back into some of the things that I should have done, going to a community college first. With the work, it felt very backwards. So I did decide that I was going to come up with a plan to do more work study, surround myself with other, peers that are actually pretty adamant about their, academic career. So and then also extra other organizational extracurricular activities, as Black Student Union, Sister Circle, things like that I involved myself with to continue to persist, to make sure that I wasn't going back home. So sorry, I know that wasn't a minute, but I'll stop there. Elijah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, hi again, I'm Elijah. So I'm from the South Side of Chicago, went to Air Force and graduated in 2016. It's by the White Sox Stadium. It's a real small school. You don't gotta look it up. But yeah, I mean, me and OneGoal, it was real interesting because my program director, she was real adamant about me joining. She was the college counselor at the school as well. And I was like, nah, I'm straight. Cause I'm like, what is this program? And sounds like this, like legit, I thought it was like, oh, it's like a nerdy program. And I was worried about people, talking about me and all that stuff. And she was like, just do it. And she asked me that like 5 times. And I was like, all right, fine, I'm gonna do it. And, as we see here, it's 2021 and I'm still here. So, or yeah, it's 2021, right? I think it's 2021. But regardless, yeah, I'm here now. And obviously it's been one of the best things that I've been a part of. They've helped me with so much. And that was really evident thing when I was transitioning from high school to college, because I was trying to go to a school that all of my other friends were going to. They were all going to SIUE, and it was like, yeah, I'm just gonna go because they're going. And I was rushing, and there was a lot of stuff that I needed to get done. One of the things was getting the housing deposit paid for, and I didn't know. I just didn't know that I had to pay for it. And then I found that I did, because my PD told me about it, and I found out it was like $500, something like that. And I knew that I didn't have $100, so I couldn't pay for it. And at the time, my parents weren't really financially stable, so they couldn't afford it either. So I ended up missing after high school. So then it was really just me like trying to bounce back, trying to understand like where did I go wrong, making up for lost time in my head. That's what I was thinking. So I had to go and work to eventually go to Illinois State in 2017. But it's really just me trying to understand, like, man, what was the barrier between me going to school at SIUE and me going in 2017? It was just like that process of me thinking about those things. And I was dealing with like other stuff at the crib as well. So it was just a lot of things on my mind, and I wasn't really focused. And it was just like communication really wasn't there for me. So it was kind of a interesting scenario, but I'm here now, so we made it.
We made it. That should be the hashtag of the webinar. We made it. Sarah, Elijah, thank you so much. We're going to hear more from them a little bit later on, but now I will pass the baton back to Daranee to talk about some of the implications and recommendations based upon the research, based upon the stories that we've heard, and especially as you just heard from Sarah and Elijah. Daranee, what implications and recommendations you got for us?
Thanks, Pam. So our research findings have informed innovations for OneGoal, and they fall into 4 different categories for our recommendations. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. We'll talk about building partnerships first. We'll talk about embracing non-degree pathways, not just traditional 2 or 4 year college pathways, thinking bigger than just academic match and financial fit, and then listening to our students' feedback and elevating the voices of our students to inform what we do. So the first one is building partnerships. One of the big implications of these research findings is that we realized that most interventions are not designed to address financial and social emotional challenges in a really deep and meaningful way. We're really good at preparing students with getting to school and in the early stages of like filling out FAFSA and applying for college applications and doing things like that. But we really need to bolster this support by cultivating new partnerships with organizations who focus on financial literacy and social emotional challenges. And so one example of what this looks like at OneGoal is that we piloted a partnership with BetterHelp to give students and alumni access to professional online counseling. And so continuing to find partnerships where we can better support our students in meeting financial and social emotional needs. Embracing non-degree pathways. So we heard a lot from our students. We heard loud and clear that like I was put on this pathway and I have a lot of debt. I have no degree because I didn't feel heard in the first place around what I wanted to do. And so really focusing on taking an equity-based approach, especially like with students of color and first-generation students, and listening to them and allowing them to define what success looks like for themselves and then supporting that. And so what this looks like at OneGoal is that we infused a culturally relevant pedagogy throughout our curriculum where we really focus on identity. And we've also incorporated non-degree pathways into our key performance indicators and are working on a data collection pilot on how do we collect enrollment and completion status on our students who are pursuing non-degree pathways. Thinking bigger than academic and financial fit. So, you know, in addition to focusing on academic match based off of GPA and test scores, and also looking at financial fit, we should also be guiding students towards institutions that are ready for them. So we talk a lot about students being college ready, but are we talking about institutions being student ready? And so looking at what completion supports are on campuses, different opportunity programs. You know, a great example is we have a lot of students in our New York region who are involved in the ASAP program, which provides them with everything from transportation vouchers to supporting with books, to providing advising and mentoring along the way to support them to completion, their degree completion. So really considering like the overall fit for students beyond just academic and financial fit. And so one of my colleagues, Shalonda, is on this call right now, and she's really done a lot of work in developing a research-based framework that guides students to look at different components, you know, including those completion supports and personal fit when evaluating their post-secondary options. And then lastly, but definitely not least, listening to our students, listening to them and identifying ways that we can support. And some of the examples of what students have said is, you know, we need more financial literacy. We need to understand how to navigate these financial challenges when we don't have somebody holding our hand, you know, once we are like pursuing our post-secondary journey. Parent engagement is another piece, making information accessible to parents so they know what's going on, they know what to expect, and then they can in turn better support their students who are navigating various challenges. And then coaching during the post-secondary experience. So providing ongoing coaching and mentoring during high school that focuses on problem solving. So in addition to the more traditional advising that supports students in understanding how to navigate their degree plan or things like that, really helping focus on like problem solving, building social belonging, and in addition to that, increasing knowledge of institutional policies. And so with that, I will go ahead and close this out with our recommendations, and I will pass the baton back to Pam as we shift into the remainder of our session today.
Daranee, thank you. There's a lot of energy in the chat, and you know, forever your hype woman. Okay, that's me. I'm like, yeah, it's a Daranee. I love it. There's so much to learn, and I appreciate it. Again, for those who have asked, the slides that we are presenting today will be sent out along with the recording of this webinar, and also the research brief that contains all of the data and lots of the information that you didn't see in the slides there in the research brief. All of that will be sent out in the coming weeks. Now, MC Melissa, I invite you to reflect on the research that was just shared and what you believe that it means for OneGoal's future.
Absolutely, and my hope is that in this reflection and summary, I'll also get at some of the questions that have come through. So you have heard our students say very clearly that the challenges that they face are complex, they're dynamic and compounding, and they are a result of a more systemic failure to actually meet the diverse needs and unique desires of our young people. It is no longer sufficient to say it's finances that are the problem. There's so much more nuance here that we truly have to honor. My sort of reflection about what this means for the organization at OneGoal, but honestly, my true hope for what this means for us as a community, as people who care about our young people, is that we can stop being political and dogmatic about some sort of prescriptive definition for success. We can acknowledge that equity does not mean doing the same for all people. It means truly addressing the needs in a much more proactive and responsive way for those who need it most. And we need to acknowledge that this work cannot be relegated to a few folks within a school or a few nonprofits, but truly needs to become the business of all schools and all roles within schools if we're going to address the complexity of the needs that our students face. And so truly those three components about redefining success, thinking differently about differentiating our interventions and our services for young people, and really expanding the number of folks that can provide the kind of wraparound supports that need to be in place to really reimagine and disrupt the status quo around supporting young people are the tenets that we hope bring us into the future. So excited to engage in the few questions while we have about 5 minutes left. Pam, which should we focus on?
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your reflection. Also, MC, very grateful. All right, we're going to open the floor for some Q&A. So you get the chance to hear more from Sarah and Elijah, and also from Daranee and MC. So the first question that we have is actually for Sarah and Elijah. The question is, what is one thing you wish you knew in high school about college that you had to learn later? Either one of you, whichever one you want to go first.
Oh, sorry. I had actually typed the answer just for the sake of time, but I definitely stated in my typed answer that I wish in high school that I knew how work study worked. You know, during my first year, I wasn't aware until after I came back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm able to work like 4 jobs with my work study dollars that are already allocated for me. I just have to put in the time. And it's also going to teach me all of these other skills. And then I also did not take advantage of is what we often know as at-risk programs for underserved, folks that actually equip you more, as opposed to your white counterparts when you first come in, to not have you feeling as intimidated or as small in those spaces when you enter those certain, classrooms and other spaces on campus. I'll turn it over to Elijah. Sorry.
Honestly, that's kind of one of the things that I agree with, that I was thinking about, because it's just, I think it's one of those things that isn't fully ventured. And I think that as I've had work study, that's one of the things that I've kind of remembered as I see it. I look at the number and I'm like, that's not guaranteed. Like, I gotta actually work and do all of the amounts that would be equivalent to that number. So I think it's one of the things that's kind of like not really spoken about too often, but it is like something that I was thinking of. Like, that is a pretty important thing, because like, what if you like rely on work study to get you through school? Like that's a whole other situation if you aren't able to do everything that you need to do. So yeah, I agree with that one, honestly.
I feel that. And also work study jobs will work with your school schedule, which is not the same for jobs that you can find off campus. So love that from both of you. Thank you so much for sharing. Another question for our illustrious panel, and this one maybe is more geared towards MC or Daranee, or both of you, because I know you both have thoughts on this. Melissa, you actually spoke to this a little bit in your reflection. The question is, what would be the best approach to move away from the assumption of who should be responsible to teach the student about college and career expectations? And this person wrote, in my experience, students are expected to learn most subjects explained here at college once they arrive on campus. And in my opinion, that is a bit too late. So what would be the best approach to move away from the assumption of who should be responsible for teaching and preparing students for college and career?
I'll let you, Melissa, if you have any thoughts, I'll let you share.
One of my greatest, the reason why I get out of bed in the morning, my greatest personal aspiration in this job, part of the reason why I took this job, is because I think it is possible in the next decade to completely reimagine how we think about what success is for high school across the country. Right now, high school it's a diploma, right? That is ultimately what we're driving towards. And in some cases where there's really transformational change that are happening with our districts and some of our partners, you're seeing us be way more ambitious about what success looks like. Success looks like kids are healthy and happy and well and are dreaming big. And when we take a much more holistic and comprehensive whole child approach to education, then you start to see that, yes, of course it's insufficient to expect students to learn these hard lessons when there is so much at risk for their livelihood. We have to teach these lessons while it's safe to fail, while it's more you can go home at the end of the day. And I truly think if we can reorient around a much more, I think, humane definition of what success looks like for young people, it's to me a no-brainer that it is all of our responsibilities then, not just a few guidance counselors, not just a few teachers, but every single person who works with young people to ensure that these life lessons are taught as part of the curriculum of our schools.
Yes, MC. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And one last question. I know that Daranee, you just answered this in the chat, but while we have like 30 seconds for you to voice over, the question for Daranee was there anything that surprised you in the research/interview process? Daranee, is there anything you'd like to voice over from your response in the chat?
Yeah, that's a great, I think for me, it was really around, it's not surprising to us that financial challenges were a theme, that social emotional challenges were a theme. I think that professional aspiration related challenges that came up were, that was something that I didn't expect to come out as strongly as it did. And that was something that repeatedly from across the country, we heard students saying, like, this is like, I didn't know why I was in school. Like, I didn't know I was doing this because this is what I thought I was supposed to do. And so, yeah, I think that was really surprising to me.
I found that to be really powerful when you were sharing, especially when you said the students said that they ended up with debt, but no degree because they were pushed towards something that wasn't their interest and wasn't their aspiration. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Wow, we are right at 4 o'clock, right? Or 4 o'clock Central, excuse me, wherever time it is, wherever you are. So without further ado, I want to say thank you all. Thank you all so much for being in attendance with us today. Thank you to our incredible panel, Melissa, Daranee, Elijah, Sarah, you're all incredible. And I'm so grateful to share space with you all here today. Thank you to the OneGoal team who is running everything behind the scenes that you can't see, okay? Shout out to marketing communications. I love y'all. And do not forget, you will get this recording and the slides and the research brief and data so that if you have more questions, we would love to engage with you and continue to do that. So be on the lookout for that in the coming weeks. And that's it. I wish I could just give a round of applause for you all. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.